Raphael was determined to care for the gravely ill beggar, a decision that ignited a storm of ridicule and scorn among the hospital staff. Everywhere he turned, he faced mockery and sneers. Days later, a millionaire appeared at his door, leaving Raphael stunned and speechless. "Who's going to attend to that one over there?" a nurse asked with palpable contempt. "I have no idea, and I don't want to be involved. He must be crawling with diseases," another nurse replied, her face twisted in disgust as she turned away. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Raphael's heart ached as he witnessed the cruelty of his colleagues. He felt a profound sorrow for the lack of compassion in the people around him. To Raphael, Eduardo was a fellow human being in desperate need of help, no different from any other patient. Taking a deep breath, he steeled himself and approached Eduardo's stretcher, determined to offer his care despite the disapproving stares. "Stay strong," my friend Raphael murmured gently as he adjusted the IV drip and meticulously cleaned Eduardo's wounds. The air was thick with discontented murmurs from other patients and staff members. Some cast Eduardo derisive glances, while others whispered harshly, questioning why Raphael was wasting his time on someone so filthy and wretched. But Raphael's resolve remained unshaken. He was committed to providing Eduardo with the dignity and care he deserved, regardless of his circumstances. "Why are we wasting precious resources on him? He doesn't even seem to care about his own recovery," a nurse scoffed, shooting Raphael a look of disapproval. "I don't understand why Raphael bothers with these kinds of people. They'll just become a problem again once they're out of here." A patient muttered to another, loud enough for Raphael to hear. Despite the barrage of cruel words and judgmental eyes, Raphael focused intently on his work, determined to care for Eduardo as best as he could. He knew he couldn't change everyone's heart, but he could make a significant difference in Eduardo's life. Known for his unwavering dedication and deep empathy, Raphael always treated each patient with the utmost dignity, no matter their background. That day, the emergency room was a cacophony of chaos, filled with frantic patients, anxious family members, and bustling medical staff. Amid the frenzy, Raphael remained a beacon of calm, addressing each case with his characteristic patience and professionalism. He understood that his calm demeanor was crucial in delivering the best possible care. Little did he know that the beggar he had chosen to help would leave an indelible mark on his life. Eduardo, the beggar, had been struck by a car. When the paramedics brought him in, his pungent odor and disheveled appearance captured everyone's attention. Eduardo was filthy, his clothes were torn, and his body was emaciated, scarcely more than skin and bones. Other staff and patients looked at him with disgust and revulsion, some even turning away to cover their noses while muttering derogatory comments. With every careful movement, Raphael tended to Eduardo, acutely aware of his fragile condition and urgent need for treatment. Even though Eduardo appeared unconscious, Raphael spoke to him softly, believing that his kind words might penetrate the darkness of Eduardo's mind. "Every life is precious, and I can't abandon anyone," Raphael reminded himself, reaffirming the deep conviction that had led him to choose nursing as his life's work. As Raphael tended to his duties, a sense of curiosity gnawed at him. What was Eduardo's story? How had fate led him to such a dire predicament? He knew that behind every face on the street lay a tale often shadowed by heartache and adversity. Raphael felt a profound urge to unravel Eduardo's past, to assist him in reclaiming his life, and, if possible, to illuminate a path toward a brighter future. Raphael's resolve was both his strength and his burden. The disdain from his peers cut deep, each sneer and scoff like a dagger to his heart. Yet, it was his empathy and unwavering dedication that fueled his mission to care for Eduardo. The other nurse's cruelty only intensified his sorrow for the callousness that pervaded the hospital. Raphael saw Eduardo not as a burden but as a soul in dire need of compassion and care. He meticulously cleaned Eduardo's wounds, his hands gentle but sure, each movement a testament to his commitment. "Stay strong," my friend Raphael whispered, his voice a soft balm in the harsh, judgmental atmosphere. The murmurs of discontent swirled around them, but Raphael's focus never wavered. Eduardo's dignity and well-being were his priorities, no matter the cost. The chaotic emergency room buzzed with activity, but Raphael remained a pillar of calm. His patience and professionalism shone through, even amidst the frenetic environment. He knew his demeanor was crucial in providing the best care possible. As he worked, his mind often wandered to Eduardo's past. What had brought him to this point? The questions gnawed at Raphael, fueling his desire to help Eduardo find a better path. Raphael's care was more than just medical attention, it was a lifeline. Eduardo's emaciated frame and disheveled appearance were met with disdain by others, but Raphael saw past the grime and odor. He saw a human being in desperate need of kindness and care. His heart ached for Eduardo, and he was determined to make a difference, one small act of compassion at a time. In the midst of the chaos, Raphael's dedication stood out. He knew he couldn't change the world, but he could change Eduardo's life. His unwavering empathy and commitment to his patients were a beacon of hope in a sea of indifference. Raphael's actions were a testament to the power of compassion, a reminder that every life, no matter how overlooked, deserved care and dignity. Throughout the day, Raphael remained unwavering in his dedication to Eduardo, constantly by his side, meticulously monitoring his vital signs, carefully changing his bandages, and ensuring he received his medications. Slowly, signs of recovery began to emerge. Eduardo's eyes fluttered open briefly, and he mumbled something indistinct. Raphael clasped his hand, his voice a beacon of hope. "You're doing wonderfully, Eduardo. We're going to get through this together, I promise," he assured with a heartfelt smile. By the end of his shift, exhaustion weighed heavily on Raphael, yet a profound sense of fulfillment enveloped him. He had made a significant impact on someone's life that day. As he left the hospital, his mind raced with thoughts of how he could further assist Eduardo. His determination grew not only to heal Eduardo's physical wounds, but also to delve into the emotional scars that haunted him. In the following days, new challenges arose. Eduardo remained hospitalized, and the staff's attitudes were unyielding. Some suggested moving him to a shelter, but Raphael vehemently disagreed. "He's not ready to leave. He needs more care," he argued passionately with his supervisor. "Raphael, we have limited resources. Other patients need these beds," the supervisor countered. But Raphael stood firm, insisting, "What will happen to him if we send him away now?" After a moment's hesitation, the supervisor conceded to let Eduardo stay a few more days. Seizing this opportunity, Raphael did everything possible for Eduardo. He engaged him in conversations, gently encouraging him to share his story, providing the support Eduardo had long been deprived of. Piece by piece, Eduardo began to open up, revealing the fragments of his life that led him to the streets. "I had a good life once. Family, friends, everything. But it all crumbled," Eduardo confessed one day, his voice quivering. "What happened?" Raphael asked gently, careful not to push too hard. "Mental issues, alcoholism. I lost everything. I left because I didn't want to be a burden on my family," Eduardo continued, tears streaming down his worn face. Raphael felt a lump in his throat as he listened. He knew many like Eduardo faced insurmountable challenges without the necessary support to overcome them. More determined than ever, he vowed to help Eduardo find a way back to a dignified life. In the hospital, Eduardo's presence was often overlooked. His disheveled appearance drew disdainful looks and whispers. The contempt in the air made his recovery even more arduous. Yet Raphael remained unwavering in his commitment to Eduardo's dignity and respect, unaffected by the judgment of others. "Why do you care so much?" a curious patient asked, observing Raphael's dedication. "Because he deserves a second chance, just like anyone else," Raphael replied with conviction. Despite his sincerity, skepticism lingered among the staff. Many judged Eduardo solely on his outward appearance, unwilling to delve deeper into his story. One nurse, vocal in her disdain since Eduardo's arrival, remarked loudly enough for Rafael to hear, "We have many patients who need help. Why waste time on a hopeless case like him?" Anger flared within Rafael, but he calmed himself. He knew that arguing would not change her mind. Instead, he focused on his work, tending to Eduardo with the same meticulous care he afforded every patient. He believed that actions spoke louder than words. Eduardo noticed everything. He sensed Rafael's efforts and the indifference of others. In a rare moment of lucidity, he expressed his gratitude and sorrow. "I don't deserve this, Rafael. Why are you doing all this for me?" he asked, his voice frail and uncertain. "We all deserve to be treated with dignity, Eduardo. The past is behind us. What matters is what we do now," Rafael replied, adjusting Eduardo's pillow with care. Days turned into weeks, and though Eduardo's demeanor remained somber, he began to heal. His wounds slowly closed and his strength returned. Rafael stayed by his side, fostering hope and resilience. Other patients, initially contemptuous, started to recognize Eduardo's transformation and respected Rafael's unwavering dedication. "Maybe you're right, Rafael. Maybe we all deserve a second chance," one patient conceded. "It's not easy, but it's worth it," Rafael responded, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Eduardo's journey to recovery was still long, but with Rafael's relentless support, he was beginning to see a glimmer of hope. Rafael ensured his wounds were treated and that he took his medications, continuing to be a pillar of unwavering support. Rafael remained steadfast by Eduardo's side throughout the day, meticulously monitoring his vital signs, changing his bandages with precision, and ensuring he received his medications. Slowly, Eduardo showed signs of recovery. His eyes fluttered open briefly, and he mumbled something indistinct. Rafael clasped his hand, his voice a beacon of hope. "You're doing wonderfully, Eduardo. We're going to get through this together, I promise," he assured with a heartfelt smile. By the end of his shift, exhaustion weighed heavily on Rafael, yet a profound sense of fulfillment enveloped him. He had made a significant impact on someone's life that day. As he left the hospital, his mind raced with thoughts of how he could further assist Eduardo. His determination grew not only to heal Eduardo's physical wounds, but also to delve into the emotional scars that haunted him. In the following days, new challenges arose. Eduardo remained hospitalized, and the staff's attitudes were unyielding. Some suggested moving him to a shelter, but Rafael vehemently disagreed. "He's not ready to leave. He needs more care," he argued passionately with his supervisor. "Rafael, we have limited resources. Other patients need these beds," the supervisor countered. But Rafael stood firm, insisting, "What will happen to him if we send him away now?" After a moment's hesitation, the supervisor conceded to let Eduardo stay a few more days. Seizing this opportunity, Rafael did everything possible for Eduardo. He engaged him in conversations, gently encouraging him to share his story, providing the support Eduardo had long been deprived of. Piece by piece, Eduardo began to open up, revealing the fragments of his life that led him to the streets. "I had a good life once. Family, friends, everything. But it all crumbled," Eduardo confessed one day, his voice quivering. "What happened?" Rafael asked gently, careful not to push too hard. "Mental issues, alcoholism. I lost everything. I left because I didn't want to be a burden on my family," Eduardo continued, tears streaming down his worn face. Rafael felt a lump in his throat as he listened. He knew many like Eduardo faced insurmountable challenges without the necessary support to overcome them. More determined than ever, he vowed to help Eduardo find a way back to a dignified life. In the hospital, Eduardo's presence was often overlooked. His disheveled appearance drew disdainful looks and whispers. The contempt in the air made his recovery even more arduous. Yet Raphael remained unwavering in his commitment to Eduardo's dignity and respect, unaffected by the judgment of others. "Why do you care so much?" a curious patient asked, observing Raphael's dedication. "Because he deserves a second chance, just like anyone else," Raphael replied with conviction. Despite his sincerity, skepticism lingered among the staff. Many judged Eduardo solely on his outward appearance, unwilling to delve deeper into his story. One nurse, vocal in her disdain since Eduardo's arrival, remarked loudly enough for Raphael to hear, "We have many patients who need help." Why waste time on a hopeless case like him? Anger flared within Raphael, but he calmed himself. He knew that arguing would not change her mind. Instead, he focused on his work, tending to Eduardo with the same meticulous care he afforded every patient. He believed that actions spoke louder than words. Eduardo noticed everything. He sensed Raphael's efforts and the indifference of others. In a rare moment of lucidity, he expressed his gratitude and sorrow. "I don't deserve this, Raphael. Why are you doing all this for me?" he asked, his voice frail and uncertain. "We all deserve to be treated with dignity, Eduardo. The past is behind us. What matters is what we do now," Raphael replied, adjusting Eduardo's pillow with care. Days turned into weeks, and though Eduardo's demeanor remained somber, he began to heal. His wounds slowly closed, and his strength returned. Raphael stayed by his side, fostering hope and resilience. Other patients, initially contemptuous, started to recognize Eduardo's transformation and respected Raphael's unwavering dedication. "Maybe you're right, Raphael. Maybe we all deserve a second chance," one patient conceded. "It's not easy, but it's worth it," Raphael responded, a gentle smile playing on his lips. Eduardo's journey to recovery was still long, but with Raphael's relentless support, he was beginning to see a glimmer of hope. Raphael ensured his wounds were treated and that he took his medications, continuing to be a pillar of unwavering support. However, one fateful day, Raphael was summoned to the head nurse's office. He knew the news wouldn't be favorable. "Raphael, we need to free up Eduardo's bed. He's going to be discharged," the head nurse stated bluntly. Raphael felt a wave of shock wash over him. Eduardo wasn't ready to leave, but he still needs care. "He's not ready," Raphael responded, struggling to keep his voice steady. The head nurse sighed, her expression a mix of understanding and resolve. "I understand, Raphael, but our resources are stretched thin. We have many other patients who need care," she explained. A knot formed in Raphael's stomach. He knew Eduardo had nowhere to go and was too weak to fend for himself. Desperately, he tried one last plea. "If we send him out now, he might not survive." "He's very weak," Raphael said, his voice tinged with worry. The head nurse shook her head, showing she grasped the gravity of the situation but was bound by protocol. "The decision is final, Raphael. Do what you can to help him, but he must leave tomorrow," she concluded, ending the conversation. Raphael left the office feeling a crushing sense of helplessness and frustration. Returning to Eduardo's room, he searched for a solution. Eduardo sat on the bed, gazing out the window, his expression vacant. Raphael sat beside him, taking a deep breath. "Eduardo, I need to tell you something." "They're going to discharge you tomorrow," he said gently. Eduardo turned slowly, his eyes a mixture of surprise and fear. "But I'm not ready." "Where will I go?" he asked, his voice trembling. Raphael took Eduardo's hand, trying to offer some reassurance. "I know, Eduardo. I'll do everything I can to help you. You can stay with me in my apartment," he said with determination. Eduardo looked relieved but still worried. He knew the situation was far from ideal but trusted Raphael. "Thank you, Raphael. I don't know what I'd do without you," Eduardo said, his gratitude evident. The next day, with the help of some colleagues, Raphael gathered Eduardo's belongings and prepared him for discharge. Eduardo, still weak, needed assistance to walk. Under the curious and sometimes disdainful glances of other employees and patients, Raphael guided Eduardo to his car. When they arrived at Raphael's apartment, Eduardo looked around, feeling a mix of discomfort and relief. He wasn't used to depending so heavily on someone, but he had no other option. "This is where you'll stay. We'll figure everything out," Raphael said as he helped Eduardo settle on the couch. The initial days were challenging. Eduardo required constant care, and Raphael struggled to balance his responsibilities at the hospital with his commitment to Eduardo. He woke early to tend to Eduardo, preparing nutritious meals and assisting with basic tasks. After work, he continued to care for him, changing bandages and ensuring he took his medications. Despite the difficulties, Eduardo began to show signs of recovery. Though still weak, he started gaining weight and looking healthier. Raphael noticed small improvements each day, fueling his motivation. He knew they were on the right path, even if it was a long and arduous journey. One evening, as they sat in the modest living room, Eduardo looked at Raphael with deep gratitude. "I don't know how to thank you for all this, Raphael. You've changed my life," Eduardo said, his voice filled with emotion. Raphael smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "You deserve this chance, Eduardo. Everyone does, and I'll be here to help you as long as you need," he replied with conviction. Eduardo nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the future. However, new challenges soon emerged. Eduardo's presence began to attract the attention of the neighbors, many of whom looked upon him with distrust and whispered malicious comments. One morning, as Eduardo took a short walk around the building to strengthen his legs, they encountered Mr. Gutierrez in the elevator. The neighbor eyed Eduardo with disdain and, without any regard for their presence, said, "This is no place for a beggar. People like him should be in a shelter, not here." Raphael felt a surge of anger but took a deep breath before responding. "Eduardo is my friend, and he will stay with me as long as necessary. He deserves to be treated with dignity like anyone else," Raphael replied, striving to remain calm. "Mr. Gutierrez scoffed and exited the elevator, shaking his head in disapproval. Eduardo, who had overheard everything, lowered his head in shame. Raphael squeezed his shoulder, trying to convey confidence. "Don't pay attention to him, Eduardo. Some people just don't understand," he said, attempting to uplift his friend. Raphael's kindness and dedication were put to the test daily, as Eduardo's presence continued to spark disapproval from other residents. Some would mutter under their breath, others would shoot disapproving glances, and a few even went so far as to file complaints with the building management. The whispers and stares were relentless, each one a reminder of the prejudice Eduardo faced. One particularly harsh confrontation occurred when Mrs. Delgado, a longtime resident, accosted Raphael in the hallway. "I heard you took in that beggar. This building has standards, Raphael. We can't have people like him here," she snapped, her tone dripping with disdain. Raphael stood his ground, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Delgado, Eduardo is a human being in need of help. We all have a duty to show compassion. I will not turn my back on him," he declared, his eyes blazing with conviction. Mrs. Delgado huffed and stormed off, leaving Raphael with a sinking feeling. Despite his best efforts, the prejudice around him seemed insurmountable. He returned to his apartment, where Eduardo was resting on the couch. Seeing Eduardo's weary face, he felt a surge of renewed determination. "Eduardo, we're going to get through this. I promise you," Raphael said, sitting beside him and taking his hand. Eduardo nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. Days turned into weeks, and Eduardo's health continued to improve. He gained strength, his wounds healed, and the light in his eyes began to return. Raphael's unwavering support and the small victories they achieved each day gave Eduardo a renewed sense of hope. Raphael worked tirelessly, balancing his job at the hospital with the care Eduardo needed. The bond between them grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect and trust. Raphael's colleagues, who initially doubted his decision, began to notice the transformation in Eduardo. One evening, after a particularly long day at the hospital, Raphael returned home to find Eduardo preparing dinner. It was a simple meal, but the effort behind it spoke volumes. "I wanted to do something for you, Raphael. You've done so much for me," Eduardo said, his voice filled with gratitude. Raphael smiled, deeply moved. "Thank you, Eduardo. This means a lot," he replied, his heart swelling with pride. As they sat down to eat, the challenges they faced seemed a little more bearable. The road ahead was still fraught with difficulties, but together they felt ready to tackle whatever came their way. Raphael knew that Eduardo's journey was far from over, but he was committed to seeing it through to the end. In the weeks that followed, Eduardo's presence in Raphael's apartment became a topic of discussion among the neighbors. Slowly, attitudes began to shift. Some residents, seeing the positive changes in Eduardo, started to reconsider their initial judgments. Raphael's unwavering dedication and the visible improvement in Eduardo's health challenged their preconceived notions. One afternoon, as Raphael and Eduardo returned from a walk, they were approached by Mrs. Martinez, a neighbor who had previously kept her distance. "I just wanted to say that I admire what you're doing, Raphael. It's clear that Eduardo has come a long way," she said, her tone sincere. Raphael smiled warmly. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. It hasn't been easy, but Eduardo is worth it," he replied. Eduardo, standing beside him, nodded in agreement. The small gestures of acceptance and kindness from a few neighbors gave Raphael hope. He knew that changing deeply ingrained prejudices would take time, but every positive interaction was a step in the right direction. Eduardo's journey of recovery continued, marked by both triumphs and setbacks. Through it all, Raphael remained by his side, a constant source of support and encouragement. Their bond, forged through adversity, grew stronger with each passing day. As Eduardo's health improved, he began to talk more about his past and his hopes for the future. Raphael listened, offering words of encouragement and helping Eduardo plan for the days ahead. Together, they faced each challenge with resilience and determination, knowing that their journey was far from over, but confident that they could overcome any obstacle as long as they had each other. In the days that followed, the negative comments from neighbors persisted. Some murmured as they passed Eduardo, and even children, influenced by their parents, pointed and laughed. The situation weighed heavily on Eduardo, already struggling to rebuild his self-esteem and dignity. Yet, amidst the hostility, Raphael's unwavering support remained a beacon of hope, driving both of them to persevere against the odds. One warm afternoon, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Raphael was busy chopping vegetables for dinner. The kitchen was filled with the savory aroma of simmering sauce when Eduardo, overwhelmed with frustration, finally erupted. "Maybe it's better if I leave, Raphael. I don't want to be the source of your troubles. Everyone here despises me," Eduardo said, his voice thick with sorrow and defeat. Raphael, sensing the gravity of Eduardo's despair, halted his preparations and sat beside him, gazing deeply into his tormented eyes. "Eduardo, you're not going anywhere. I brought you here because I believe in you. I won't let the ignorance of others dictate our lives. We'll face this together, come what may," Raphael declared with unwavering conviction. Eduardo nodded, but Raphael could see the heavy burden he carried. Determined to change their fate, Raphael embarked on a mission to win over their neighbors. He approached them one by one, sharing Eduardo's story with heartfelt sincerity. Eduardo is fighting a tough battle to rebuild his life. He deserves a chance, just like anyone else. I know it's hard to understand, but he's a person, a human being with dreams and fears, Raphael pleaded passionately in the dimly lit hallways. Gradually, some neighbors began to soften, touched by Raphael's earnestness and Eduardo's struggle. But there were still those who clung stubbornly to their prejudices, making their disdain painfully clear. One evening, as Raphael was returning home, he encountered Mrs. Martinez, a notoriously gossipy neighbor. She approached with a stern expression, her concern barely masking her true feelings. "Raphael, I know you're trying to help, but people here are uneasy with Eduardo around. Maybe you should reconsider," she suggested, her voice dripping with feigned empathy. Raphael, striving to keep his composure, responded calmly but firmly. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand your concerns, but Eduardo poses no threat. He is under my care, and all I ask is for you to try to understand and support us if you can," he said, his voice steady but resolute. The conversation left Mrs. Martinez unconvinced, yet Raphael's resolve remained unshaken. He knew that changing minds would take time, patience, and relentless determination. No matter how hostile their environment, Raphael vowed to stand by Eduardo's side. He believed that, in time, people would see the truth and abandon their prejudices. In the weeks that followed, Raphael worked tirelessly, both at the hospital and at home. He saw glimmers of progress in Eduardo's recovery, small victories that fueled his determination. Yet the relentless negative murmurs of the neighbors cast a long shadow over their days, making every step forward feel like an uphill battle. The tension reached a boiling point when Mr. Salazar, the apartment owner, decided to intervene. One afternoon, while Raphael was at work, Eduardo heard a harsh knock on the door. Struggling to his feet, he opened it to find Mr. Salazar, his face etched with displeasure. "Where's Raphael?" he demanded curtly. "He's at work." "Can I help you?" Eduardo replied politely, though fear tightened his chest. Mr. Salazar brushed past him, his disdain palpable. "Listen, you can't stay here. This building isn't for beggars. I've had enough complaints from the neighbors. Either you leave or Raphael will be evicted," he declared coldly. Eduardo's heart sank. He knew he was a burden to Raphael, but he had nowhere else to go. Just then, the door opened and Raphael entered, groceries in hand. He froze at the sight of Mr. Salazar and the worry etched on Eduardo's face. "What's going on?" he asked, setting the bag down. Mr. Salazar turned to Raphael, his expression stern. "Raphael, I've had numerous complaints. Your friend here has to leave, or you both will be evicted," he stated bluntly. Raphael felt a surge of anger mixed with fear. "Mr. Salazar, Eduardo is under my care. He's recovering, and I'm doing everything I can to help him. He has nowhere else to go. Please, reconsider," Raphael pleaded, his voice filled with desperation. Mr. Salazar shook his head. "I'm sorry, Raphael, but I have to think of the other tenants. They're not comfortable with this situation. You have until the end of the week," he said before turning and leaving the apartment. As the door closed, Eduardo slumped into a chair, his face a mask of despair. "I'm so sorry, Raphael. I never wanted to cause you trouble," he murmured, his voice barely audible. Raphael knelt beside him, taking his hands. "Eduardo, this isn't your fault. We'll figure something out. I won't let you go back to the streets," he vowed, his determination unwavering. The next few days were a whirlwind of frantic efforts as Raphael sought a solution. He reached out to local shelters, charities, and even friends, hoping to find a place for Eduardo. The response was disheartening. Resources were stretched thin everywhere, and finding a suitable place seemed nearly impossible. On the last evening before their eviction deadline, Raphael and Eduardo sat in silence, the weight of their predicament heavy in the air. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. Raphael opened it to find Mrs. Martinez standing there, her expression softer than he had ever seen. "I've been thinking about what you said, Raphael. Maybe I was too quick to judge. I spoke to some of the neighbors, and we want to help," she said, handing Raphael an envelope. Inside was a modest amount of money, contributions from a few sympathetic neighbors. It's not much, but it might help you find a temporary place for Eduardo until you can figure something out, Mrs. Martinez added, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and hope. Tears welled up in Raphael's eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Martinez. This means more than you can imagine," he said, his voice choked with emotion. The small act of kindness reignited a spark of hope in Raphael and Eduardo. With the collected money, Raphael managed to secure a short-term stay at a modest motel, buying them a bit more time. The next day, as Raphael helped Eduardo settle into their new temporary home, he felt a renewed sense of determination. They still faced an uncertain future, but the gesture from their neighbors showed that compassion could break through even the hardest of prejudices. Raphael vowed to continue fighting for Eduardo, believing that together they could overcome any obstacle and ultimately find a permanent place where Eduardo could regain his dignity and build a new life. "Mr." Salazar turned to Raphael, his irritation barely concealed. "I made it clear. Either he goes, or you both do. I won't tolerate a beggar disturbing my tenants," he said, crossing his arms defiantly. Raphael felt a surge of anger but kept his voice calm and steady. "Eduardo is not leaving. He's under my care, and he has every right to be here. If that means we have to find somewhere else to live, then so be it," Raphael stated firmly. "Mr." Salazar was taken aback by Raphael's unwavering stance. He had expected capitulation, not defiance. "Are you seriously willing to lose your home for him?" he asked, incredulous. "Yes, I am. Eduardo is my friend, and I won't abandon him." "If we need to leave, we'll find another place," Raphael replied, meeting Mr. Salazar's gaze with steely resolve. After a tense silence, Mr. Salazar shrugged dismissively. "Fine. You have until the end of the month to vacate," he said before storming out, slamming the door behind him. Eduardo sank onto the couch, guilt and sorrow etched on his face. "I'm sorry, Raphael. I didn't mean to cause all this. Maybe it's better if I go," he murmured, his voice choked with emotion. Raphael sat beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're in this together, Eduardo. No matter what, we'll find a way," he promised, his voice filled with a fierce, unyielding hope. Raphael slid into the seat beside Eduardo, his touch gentle yet firm as he placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Eduardo, we will find a way out of this mess together. I promise I will not abandon you. We'll discover a place where we can live without the shadows of prejudice haunting us." Raphael vowed, his voice brimming with empathy and resolve. The ensuing days became a whirlwind of activity as they hunted for a new sanctuary. Raphael, despite his exhausting shifts at the hospital and the burden of caring for Eduardo, devoted countless hours to scouring for affordable and suitable apartments. It was an uphill battle, but Raphael's spirit remained unbroken. During this challenging period, Eduardo, though still fragile and recuperating, did everything within his power to assist. They formed an unbreakable bond, a team facing adversity side by side. One afternoon, while Raphael was immersed in his hospital duties, Eduardo received a call from a real estate agent Raphael had contacted earlier. He eagerly noted down all the information and waited impatiently for Raphael's return. As soon as Raphael walked through the door, Eduardo couldn't contain his excitement. "Raphael, I think I've found us a place." The agent said, "We can visit it tomorrow. It's a bit out of the center, but it looks promising," Eduardo announced, his eyes shining with hope. Raphael's face lit up with a mixture of relief and joy. "That's fantastic news, Eduardo. Let's check it out tomorrow, and if it's right for us, we'll move in as soon as possible," he replied, his voice infused with optimism. The following day, they visited the potential new home. It was modest but exuded a cozy charm and tranquility, far removed from the judgmental eyes of their former neighbors. Raphael candidly explained Eduardo's situation to the owner. To his pleasant surprise, the owner was compassionate and welcoming. "Everyone deserves a fresh start. If you need anything, just let me know," the owner said, shaking Raphael's hand warmly. Securing the new home brought a wave of relief. Raphael and Eduardo began planning their move with renewed vigor. The sense of impending peace was almost tangible. While packing, Raphael looked at Eduardo with a heartening smile. "We're almost there, Eduardo. A new beginning awaits us," he said, feeling hopeful for the future. Eduardo nodded, his spirits lifted higher than they had been in a long time. As they moved into their new home, the burdens of the past began to lift. The atmosphere was lighter, and the prospect of a fresh start invigorated both of them. Raphael continued to balance his demanding job with caring for Eduardo, but the sense of community they began to build in their new neighborhood made the challenges seem more manageable. In their new surroundings, Eduardo found a sense of belonging that he hadn't felt in years. He started engaging in small activities within the community, slowly rebuilding his self-esteem. Raphael, ever the beacon of support, encouraged Eduardo to pursue new interests and slowly integrate into their new environment. One evening, as they sat on their small balcony overlooking a quiet street, Eduardo turned to Raphael, his eyes brimming with gratitude. "Thank you for believing in me, Raphael. I don't think I could have made it without you," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Raphael smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "You have always had the strength within you, Eduardo. I'm just glad I could be here to help you see it," he replied. Their journey had been fraught with challenges, but the bond they had forged through hardship was unbreakable. Together they faced each day with renewed hope and determination, knowing that no matter what came their way, they would face it together, stronger and more resilient than ever before. The morning after the move, Raphael was busy organizing the last few boxes in their new apartment. Eduardo, still weak, rested on the couch, but there was a calmness in his expression that Raphael had never seen before. The peace of their new environment was starting to take hold. However, their serene morning was abruptly interrupted by a loud, firm knock on the door. Raphael frowned in confusion, not expecting any visitors. He opened the door to find an impeccably dressed man standing there, exuding an aura of authority and wealth that clashed starkly with their humble setting. "Where is my son?" the man demanded, his voice urgent yet controlled. Raphael was taken aback by the question. He looked at the man, bewildered. "Son? What are you talking about?" Raphael asked, trying to make sense of the situation. The man strode into the apartment uninvited, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto Eduardo, who was now sitting up, a mix of shock and fear on his face. "Eduardo," the man's voice trembled slightly. Eduardo's eyes widened in recognition. "Dad," he whispered, the word barely audible. Raphael stood there, stunned and confused, trying to process the unfolding drama. The silence in the room was thick as Armando, the wealthy man, struggled to contain his emotions. Raphael slowly closed the door, still grappling with the unexpected turn of events. "Eduardo is my son. He vanished years ago," Armando explained, turning to Raphael with a look of anguish and hope. Raphael felt a lump form in his throat. He could never have imagined that the man he had taken in was the estranged son of a millionaire. "I had no idea." Eduardo never mentioned it, Raphael stammered, still in shock. Armando took a deep breath and sat down, preparing to reveal the full story. Eduardo had everything money could buy: the best education, endless opportunities. But one day he started to withdraw. He became distant and reclusive. "I thought it was just a phase," Armando began, his voice heavy with regret. The weight of his words seemed to crush Eduardo. At that time, Armando was so engrossed in his business empire that he failed to notice his son's silent cries for help. One night, Eduardo disappeared without a trace. It was then that Armando realized the gravity of the situation. He had been living with the guilt of not being there for his son when he needed him the most. "I needed you," Dad Eduardo finally spoke, his voice trembling with a mix of pain and anger. "Where were you when I was alone on the streets, fighting to survive?" Armando closed his eyes, each of Eduardo's words cutting deep. "I made mistakes, Eduardo. Huge mistakes. I tried to find you, but it was like searching for a needle in a haystack. I hired detectives, informed the police, but you seem to have vanished. I never gave up on you." Armando pleaded, his voice breaking. Eduardo shook his head, struggling to control his emotions. "I had to face the pain alone. My mind was a mess, and I ended up on the streets. I got lost, and after I got better, I didn't want to go back. You always ignored me, always put work first. I remember calling you, wanting to talk, but you were always too busy." Eduardo's voice was full of bitterness, tears streaming down his face. Armando stood up, taking a few steps toward Eduardo before kneeling in front of him. "Eduardo, I know nothing I say can erase the years of suffering, but I'm here now. I want to make things right. Please let me be the father you deserved," Armando implored, his words filled with desperation. The tension in the apartment was almost unbearable as Eduardo and Armando stared at each other, emotions raw and exposed. Rafael watched, his heart aching for both of them. "Eduardo, please," Armando continued, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you again. I want to help you rebuild your life, to make amends for all the times I wasn't there." His eyes were pleading, his hands trembling. Eduardo looked away, his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He had longed for this moment, for his father's recognition and apology, but the wounds of the past were deep and painful. Rafael, sensing the need for a mediator, gently stepped forward. "Mr. Armando, Eduardo has been through a lot. He's still recovering, both physically and emotionally. This is a lot for him to process," Rafael said, his voice calm and soothing. "Maybe you both need some time to talk, to understand each other. Healing takes time, but it can start with a conversation." Eduardo glanced at Rafael, gratitude flickering in his eyes. He took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, Dad, we can talk," he said quietly, the anger in his voice giving way to a fragile hope. Armando's face softened with relief. "Thank you, Eduardo. Thank you," he murmured. They moved to the small kitchen table, where they could speak more privately. Rafael retreated to the other room, giving them space but staying close enough to be there if needed. The conversation was slow and halting at first, filled with long pauses and tentative words. Armando spoke of his regrets, his search for Eduardo, and his desire to make things right. Eduardo, in turn, shared his experiences, the pain of abandonment, and the struggles he faced on the streets. As the hours passed, a fragile bridge of understanding began to form between them. There were tears, moments of silence, and glimpses of reconciliation. Rafael could hear the soft murmur of their voices, a mix of pain and healing. By the time the conversation ended, the sun had set, casting a gentle twilight over the apartment. Eduardo and Armando emerged from the kitchen, their faces showing signs of emotional exhaustion, but also a tentative peace. "Rafael," Eduardo said, his voice steadier now. "Dad and I have talked. It's going to take time, but we're willing to try. He's going to help me with my recovery." Armando nodded, his expression sincere. "Thank you, Rafael, for taking care of my son. I owe you a debt I can never repay." Rafael smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. "The most important thing is that you're both here now, ready to move forward. Eduardo deserves a chance to heal and rebuild his life, and with your support, I believe he can do it." The three of them stood in a moment of quiet solidarity, a new beginning on the horizon. It would not be an easy journey, but with love, determination, and understanding, They had the strength to face the challenges ahead. Together, they would navigate the path to healing, one step at a time. "You never understood me," Eduardo said, his words dripping with years of pent-up resentment. Armando sighed, feeling the weight of his son's accusations. He knew he had failed Eduardo in many ways, but he also carried his own burdens of regret. "I was trying to do my best for you," Armando replied softly, his voice tinged with defense. "Your best only ever seemed to matter to you. Your empire, your reputation. I was just an afterthought," Eduardo retorted, his words harsher than he intended. Armando lowered his gaze, feeling the sting of truth in Eduardo's words. He had been negligent, putting his ambitions above his family's needs. "I know I failed you, Eduardo. I know I wasn't there when you needed me most, but I want to change that. I want to make things right," Armando said, his voice filled with genuine remorse. Eduardo looked at his father, seeing the pain and vulnerability in his eyes. He knew he couldn't ignore the past, but he also sensed a glimmer of hope for forgiveness and reconciliation. Rafael, witnessing the emotional exchange, felt a deep empathy for both of them. He understood the depths of Eduardo's suffering, but also recognized the sincerity of Armando's regret. It was a complex situation, fraught with unresolved emotions and deep wounds. Eduardo took a deep breath, attempting to calm his racing heart. He glanced at Rafael, seeking silent support. Rafael gave a subtle nod, encouraging him to hear his father out. "I don't know, Dad. I need time to process all of this and to trust you again. But maybe, just maybe, I'm willing to try," Eduardo said, his voice wavering with vulnerability. Armando smiled sadly, accepting his son's words as a small beginning. "Thank you, Eduardo. That's all I ask for. A chance to show you that I can be different, that I can be present," he replied, taking his son's hand in his own. Rafael felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He knew this was just the first of many difficult conversations Eduardo and Armando would have, but it was a beginning that could lead to healing and rebuilding a relationship that had been broken for so long. The three of them remained silent for a moment, each lost in their thoughts. "I never stopped looking for you," Armando said, his voice cracking. Rafael, sensing this was a moment of reconciliation that needed to happen without his intervention, took a step back. "Maybe I should give them a moment," Rafael suggested, starting to move towards the door. "No, Rafael, stay. You did for Eduardo what I couldn't do. You took care of him," said Armando, turning to Rafael with gratitude in his eyes. Rafael stopped, feeling a mix of emotions. He had simply done what he thought was right, but now he saw that his actions had had a much greater impact than he could have anticipated. Eduardo looked at Rafael with eyes full of gratitude. "Rafael, you are my family. I don't know what I would have done without you," Eduardo said, his voice thick with emotion. Rafael felt his eyes fill with tears. He had never expected gratitude, he just wanted to help someone in need. "Eduardo, I just did what anyone should do. I'm happy you found your father," Rafael said softly. Armando took another step towards Eduardo, finally closing the distance between them. He hesitantly extended his hand before embracing Eduardo tightly. "I will never let you go again, son. We will go through this together as a family," Armando vowed, his voice muffled by Eduardo's shoulder. Eduardo returned the hug, tears streaming down his face, feeling a mix of relief and happiness. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, but with his family reunited, there was hope. After the intense conversation with his father, Eduardo felt a whirlwind of emotions inside. Rafael, standing silently by his side, then made a decision. "Rafael, I would like to continue living with you, at least for now. When I am better, then I will decide what I will do with my life," Eduardo said with determination and gratitude. Rafael smiled, feeling immense relief at Eduardo's decision. He knew it would not be easy, but he was willing to do whatever it took to help Eduardo fully recover, both physically and emotionally. The next few weeks were a period of adjustment for all three of them. Eduardo continued his recovery, buoyed by the newfound connection with his father and the unwavering support of Rafael. Armando visited frequently, slowly building a relationship with his son, one step at a time. They talked about the past, their mistakes, and their hopes for the future, each conversation bringing them closer. Rafael, meanwhile, juggled his responsibilities at the hospital with caring for Eduardo. Despite the challenges, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment seeing Eduardo's gradual improvement and the healing of his relationship with Armando. The bond between the three of them grew stronger, rooted in love, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to overcoming the past. One evening, as they sat together in the cozy living room, Armando turned to Rafael. "I don't think I can ever fully express my gratitude, Rafael. You've done more for Eduardo than I ever could," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Rafael shook his head. "You don't need to thank me, Armando. Eduardo is family to me now, and I would do anything for him. I'm just glad to see him healing and happy," he replied. Eduardo looked at both men, his heart full of gratitude and hope. "I wouldn't be here without either of you. Thank you for believing in me, for standing by me. I know the road ahead won't be easy, but with both of you by my side, I know I can face anything," he said, his voice strong and confident. As the night drew on, they sat together, sharing stories and dreams for the future. It was a moment of peace and connection, a testament to the power of love and resilience. They knew there would be challenges ahead, but they also knew that together they could overcome anything. And so, with hearts full of hope and determination, they faced the future united as a family. "For me, it's okay, Eduardo. Let's take care of each other as friends," like family, Rafael replied warmly. Armando watched the scene in silence, his eyes filled with a mix of pride and sadness. He knew there was a lot of work to do to rebuild his relationship with Eduardo, but he also knew that the first step had been taken in the right direction. "If that is what you want, Eduardo, then I support your decision. I will be here for you no matter what happens," said Armando, his voice soft and full of promises of redemption. Eduardo nodded, feeling a weight lift from his shoulders. He knew there were still many unresolved issues between him and his father, but he also knew there was hope for the future. "Thank you, Dad. I appreciate your support, and Rafael, thank you for everything. I don't know what would have become of me without you," Eduardo said, his eyes shining with sincere gratitude. Rafael's apartment was immersed in an atmosphere of tension and hope. Eduardo, Rafael, and Armando were in the midst of a serious conversation when a firm knock on the door interrupted the moment. Rafael frowned, confused. Armando exchanged a curious look with Eduardo, who only shrugged his shoulders. "Who could it be?" Rafael murmured as he headed towards the door. When he opened it, there stood Mr. Salazar, the owner of the apartment. He looked uncomfortable but determined. "Mr. Salazar?" Rafael asked, surprised. Mr. Salazar took a step forward, his gaze quickly falling on Armando before settling on Rafael. "I was passing by and I heard some things. I think we need to talk," said Mr. Salazar. Rafael opened the door wider and Mr. Salazar entered, casting nervous glances around the apartment before finally speaking. "Eduardo, Rafael, I was wrong," he began, taking a deep breath. "I misunderstood the situation. Eduardo's health is important, and he must remain here as long as he needs to recover." Eduardo, who was sitting on the couch, stood up with difficulty but with determination, his eyes shining with indignation. "So now that you see a millionaire here, you're changing your mind?" Eduardo asked firmly. "You kicked us out because I was a beggar. You're prejudiced, Mr. Salazar, and now you want to come here pretending that you care." Mr. Salazar was visibly uncomfortable with the accusation, his hands trembling slightly. "Eduardo, I made a mistake, mister." Salazar tried to explain, his voice wavering. "It wasn't right on my part, but I'm here to correct it. You deserve a chance to recover." Eduardo narrowed his eyes, unconvinced by Mr. Salazar's words. "You're only saying that because you saw my father here. If he weren't here, you would have kicked us out without thinking twice." The silence that followed was heavy, each of Eduardo's words echoing in the small room. Rafael put his hand on Eduardo's shoulder, trying to calm him. "Eduardo, let him say what he has to say," Rafael said softly. "Mister." Salazar suddenly looked older and tired. "I know my actions were motivated by prejudice and unfair assumptions, but I want to do the right thing now. You can stay here, and I will make sure that no one else bothers you, mister," Salazar stated. Armando, who had been watching silently, took a step forward, his furious eyes fixed on Mr. Salazar. "How dare you treat my son that way," Armando said, his voice full of indignation. "You judged him by his appearance, by his state. That is unacceptable." Mr. Salazar was visibly uncomfortable with the accusation, his hands shaking slightly. "I made a mistake. It was not right of me, but I am here to correct it. You deserve a chance to recover, mister," Salazar tried to explain, his voice wavering. "Mister." Salazar sighed, suddenly looking older and tired. "I know that my actions were motivated by prejudice and unfair assumptions, but I want to do the right thing now. You can stay here, and I will make sure that no one else bothers you," said Mr. Salazar, his voice gaining firmness. Armando took a step forward, still furious but willing to listen. "You need to understand that what you did was not just a mistake, it was cruel. My son has suffered too much on the streets, and being treated like this is unacceptable," said Armando, his voice full of emotion. Armando was furious. The conversation with Mr. Salazar had only intensified his anger, and he could not accept that Eduardo continued living in that environment. He looked at his son and then at Rafael with a firm and determined expression. "Eduardo, you are not going to spend another minute in this house," declared Armando, his voice sharp and full of authority. Eduardo looked at his father, surprised by the intensity of his words. "I will call a moving company. They will be here in an hour," Armando announced, putting his cell phone in his pocket. Eduardo looked at Rafael, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and uncertainty. "Dad, wait. You don't need to do this so hastily. Let's talk about it," he pleaded, his voice steady but insistent. Armando shook his head, his determination unwavering. "No, Eduardo. You've been through enough. I cannot allow you to stay in a place where you've been disrespected and mistreated. We will find a better place, somewhere you can heal without prejudice," Armando insisted. Rafael, seeing the resolve in Armando's eyes, stepped forward. "Armando, I understand your concern, but moving so suddenly might be too stressful for Eduardo. He's made progress here, and uprooting him right now could be detrimental. Let's take a moment to think this through," he suggested calmly. Mr. Salazar, witnessing the tension, tried to interject. "Please, I truly am sorry. I will ensure Eduardo is treated with the respect he deserves. You don't need to move out," he said, his voice desperate. Eduardo, feeling the gravity of the situation, took a deep breath. "Dad, Rafael is right. Moving right now might be too much. Let's give it some time, see how things go. If I feel unsafe or uncomfortable, then we can consider moving. But for now, I want to stay," he said, his voice steady. Armando looked at his son, seeing the strength and determination in his eyes. He sighed, his anger slowly dissipating. "All right, Eduardo, we will stay for now. But the moment you feel uneasy, we are leaving. Understood?" he said, his voice softening. Eduardo nodded, grateful for his father's support. "Understood, Dad." "Thank you," he replied. Mr. Salazar, relieved, nodded as well. "I will do everything in my power to make amends. You have my word," he promised. With the immediate crisis averted, the atmosphere in the apartment began to calm. Rafael looked at Eduardo and Armando, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. "Let's focus on Eduardo's recovery. We can deal with everything else as it comes," he said, his voice filled with hope. The days that followed were marked by a delicate balance of healing and rebuilding. Eduardo continued his recovery, supported by both Rafael and his father. Mr. Salazar kept his word, ensuring that Eduardo was treated with respect and kindness by the other tenants. Armando visited frequently, each time strengthening his bond with Eduardo. They talked about the past, their mistakes, and their hopes for the future. Eduardo slowly began to open up, sharing his experiences and fears, and Armando listened with patience and understanding. Rafael, always by Eduardo's side, continued to provide unwavering support. The bond between the three of them grew stronger, rooted in love, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to overcoming the past. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Eduardo looked at his father and Rafael, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you two. Thank you for believing in me, for standing by me," he said, his voice filled with emotion. Armando smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "We're family, Eduardo. We will always be here for you," he replied. Rafael nodded, his heart full of hope for the future. "Together we can face anything," he said, his voice steady and confident. With hearts full of hope and determination, they faced the future, united as a family. The journey ahead would not be easy, but they knew that with love and support, they could overcome any obstacle and build a new life together. Mr. Salazar nodded resignedly. "I understand, Mr. Armando. I will do whatever is necessary to help with the move," he answered, trying to seem helpful. Eduardo sighed, feeling exhausted both physically and emotionally. The argument was draining his strength, but he knew he could not refuse his father's help at that moment. Time passed quickly, and soon the moving company arrived. The workers began to load the boxes and furniture in the truck under Armando's watchful eye. "Rafael, you have done a great job taking care of my son. I thank you for everything," said Armando, with a tone of gratitude in his voice. "I did what any person should do, Armando. Eduardo is a good person and deserves a chance to recover," Rafael replied sincerely. With everything ready, Eduardo got up from the couch, walking slowly towards the door. He took a last look at the apartment, feeling strange leaving a place that, despite everything, had provided him with a little peace. "Come on, son. The new apartment will be better for you," said Armando, placing his hand on Eduardo's shoulder. Eduardo nodded, feeling grateful for his father and Rafael. Together they left the apartment, ready to start over in a new place. Mr. Salazar watched in silence, knowing that his attitude had caused this change, but also realizing that it was the right thing to do. As they got into the car, Eduardo felt a wave of hope. He knew that with the support of Rafael and Armando, he could face anything that came his way. Finally, he felt a little stronger and determined to rebuild his life. Eduardo was beginning to adapt to his new life in the new apartment. The place was modest but much more comfortable and safe than the street or the old apartment. Rafael and Armando continued to offer all the support Eduardo needed, from medical care to emotional support. Rafael helped Eduardo with the exercises and physiotherapy daily. Recovery was slow and required patience, but Eduardo was determined to improve. In one of the exercise moments, Rafael encouraged Eduardo. "Come on, Eduardo," once again. "I know it's hard, but you're making progress," said Rafael with a supportive smile. "Thank you, Rafael. I know it's not easy for you either," answered Eduardo, sweating and panting. Armando, despite his busy schedule, made sure to be present whenever he could. He wanted to make up for lost time with his son and show that he was committed to Eduardo's recovery. One day he brought some food and prepared a meal for the three of them. "Son, I made your favorite meal. I thought you might like a little comfort in the middle of all this," said Armando, placing the plates on the table. "Thank you, Dad. This means a lot to me," answered Eduardo, excited by the simple but meaningful gesture. The weeks went by, and little by little, Eduardo began to show signs of improvement. He was physically stronger and emotionally more stable. Rafael and Armando realized that the change and the continuous support were making a difference. However, the tranquility did not last long. Eduardo began to feel a strong pain in the chest and had difficulty breathing. Rafael, always attentive, noticed something was wrong and acted quickly. "Eduardo, you don't look well. We need to get you to the hospital," said Rafael, worried. "I don't know, Rafael. I feel a very strong pain," answered Eduardo with a weak voice. Rafael didn't waste time and immediately called Armando, who was at work. "Armando, we have to take Eduardo to the hospital now." "He's not okay," said Rafael, trying to stay calm. "I'm on my way." "Don't leave him alone," answered Armando, hanging up the phone hastily. In the hospital, Eduardo was admitted urgently. Rafael and Armando were in the waiting room, anxious for news. Time seemed to pass too slowly while they waited. "I'm not going to lose you again, son. Not now that I found you," said Armando, his voice full of emotion. "We're going to get through this together, Dad." "I'm not going to give up," answered Eduardo, trying to be strong. The medical team worked quickly to stabilize Eduardo. Rafael was at Armando's side, offering all the support possible. "He is strong, Armando." "Eduardo was going to get through this," Rafael said, trying to comfort the worried father. Hours felt like days, but eventually a doctor approached them. "Eduardo is stable now. It appears he had a severe anxiety attack, compounded by his underlying health issues. We'll keep him here for observation, but he should recover with proper care and rest," the doctor explained. Relief washed over Rafael and Armando. "Thank you, Dr. Armando said, his voice filled with gratitude. They were allowed to see Eduardo, who looked pale but was resting comfortably. "Dad, Rafael," he murmured weakly, trying to smile. "We're here, Eduardo. You're going to be okay," Rafael said, taking Eduardo's hand. "We'll get through this, son." "One step at a time," Armando added, his eyes filled with determination and love. As they stood by Eduardo's bedside, the bond between them felt stronger than ever. They knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but with their unwavering support for each other, they were ready to face whatever came their way. Finally, the doctor left the room and went to them. "Now he's stable. We need to monitor him closely, but I think he'll recover," said the doctor with a reassuring tone of voice. Armando and Rafael sighed with relief, but knew there was still a long road ahead. Eduardo was transferred to a room where the two of them could stay by his side. "Son, you are stronger than you think. I am so proud of you," said Armando, holding Eduardo's hand. "Thank you, Dad, and thank you, Rafael, for never giving up on me," said Eduardo, with tears in his eyes. The days in the hospital were difficult, but with the constant support of Rafael and Armando, Eduardo began to improve again. They spent hours talking, remembering the past, and making plans for the future. "When I get out of here, I want to help other people like Rafael helped me. I want to make a difference," said Eduardo, determined. "And you will, son." "I am sure of it," answered Armando with pride. Finally, the day came when Eduardo was discharged from the hospital. Rafael and Armando were by his side, ready to take him back to the apartment. Leaving the hospital was a moment of celebration and relief. Eduardo felt strong, both physically and emotionally, and was eager to start his new life. "I am so happy that you are coming home, son. We have a lot to celebrate," said Armando while helping Eduardo get into the car. "Yes, Dad, it is a new life for me. and I want to enjoy every moment. United by love and purpose, Eduardo, Rafael, and Armando began a new stage of their lives, ready to face the future and transform challenges into opportunities for growth and solidarity. What a powerful journey we've witnessed, from the compassionate nurse who decided to care for a sick beggar, despite the ridicule from his colleagues, to the emotional reunion of Eduardo and his father, Armando. This story beautifully highlights themes of compassion, resilience, and the transformative power of love and support. What have you learned from this story? Share one thing that you have learned and will bring to practice in your life in the comments below. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support helps us continue sharing impactful stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in our next video. A hug, and until next time.